Simple questions for 100 people. Welcome to my experiment, a 100-person project. I'm Bill Carell, and this is my investigation. I'm going to be gathering data from 100 beautiful human beings for the sole purpose to see what actually happens across the interviews. The questions are fixed, and all the interviews will remain consistent, with the variable being the actual participants themselves and their answers. So, Elizabeth, it's as if I'm having you come sit on my porch to share your thoughts so I can learn about people. Looking forward to what we're going to learn when we're done. Don't know what's going to be, but very interested in you, your story, and the process. So, it's my distinct pleasure to, well, no, I'll have you introduce yourself, okay? What is your full name?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, Bill. My name is Elizabeth Trezise Barbour. Trezise is my maiden name.
Very cool. Interesting. So that sounds like a name that has a couple of different nationalities intersecting there.
It does, but believe it or not, it's just English. You would think it was more interesting than that, but apparently my dad's family was from Cornwall in England. So,
Really?
yeah.
Okay. That's wonderful. Well, that'll lead us right into the next question, which is what is your favorite nickname that most people don't know about you?
Okay. Well, the nickname I'm most known by is Lee. When I was in high school, elementary school, I was called Lee by my friends. But the one that most people don't know about me, apparently, when I was a little girl, I couldn't say my name, Elizabeth. And
Yeah.
so my cousin would ask me, say, "What's your name?" And I would say, "Beddits, Beddits." And so now my cousin, who is quite a bit older than me, he'll come in and he'll call me Beddits. Well, some of my girlfriends pick that up, and then their kids now call me Beddits, and so it's kind of an affectionate little nickname.
It's a great name. As a matter of fact, you're my first Bettits. I've known a
First
lot of
Beddits.
Elizabeth. Yeah. And I mean, that gives rise to Beth and Liz and
Yeah.
Lizzie and, Bet and whatever. But Bettits, and how would you spell that?
Bettits.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
bet it. So, and I was never Betsy as a young girl because my middle name was actually Ross, and so then I would have been Betsy Ross, and my parents were like, "Yeah, no, we're not calling you that."
Is that a family name?
I was my grandfather's name on one side. Yes.
Cool. Cool. I've got a dear friend whose name was Ross, and he
Yeah.
was one of the best guys, no doubt about it. So I love the nickname. Are there any other nicknames that people have for you?
My daughter calls me Moochie, and I'm not sure why. Like she calls me Moo Moo and Moochie. I'm like Moo Moo is in like a cow, and she's like, "Well, no, not exactly, Mom." It's just her little affectionate. I don't know.
Yeah, that's funny. That reminds me of the sidekick from one of the cowboy shows back in the 1950s. The young boy's name was Moochie.
Oh yeah, Moochie. Yeah, I don't know. She loves calling me Moochie. I'm like, okay.
Well, that's cool. You're loved if people are going through the trouble of making up pet names for you.
That's so true. What are some of your nicknames?
Other than PIA, I've been called Big Bill. I've been called Billy. Um, my favorite one. Um, My favorite one that I really enjoy, that some of my really good friends call me, is Bud.
Bud. I like
Yeah.
that. That's nice.
So even though we're not blood brothers, they still refer to me as Bud. I have two guys that I really think the world of, and they somehow our relationship has gotten to the point where after we hug, you say, "How you doing, Bud?"
That's great. It's funny you remind me. I have a girlfriend from 8th grade, and we call each other Bud. She's the only other person that we call each other Bud. So
You might be Rosebud. I think I'm a little different. I might be something else, but all right. So I think we've done a pretty good job. I have a feeling we could really get in deep on the nicknames. There's probably some that are not necessarily for prime time, but
Yes.
at least for me. So I want to ask you, how old, Elizabeth, were you when you first noticed what color hair you had?
That's a funny question. because I can't remember as a child what that would be, but my initial response to that would be 3 years ago when I stopped coloring my hair. And realized that I'm actually gray, sort of that platinum blonde gray-ish, and I was like, "Oh, that's what my real hair color is," after 25 years of coloring it, so
That's awesome. So, have you ever considered just letting it go that way, or at least just streaking your hair or something of
Oh,
that nature?
yeah, no, yeah, I stopped coloring it during the pandemic like a lot of women did. And so this is gray. I realize your listeners can't see this, but it's sort of a blondish platinum, but it's gray.
It's got really nice highlights and it's clear,
Yeah,
that it's not just one color, which I think is really wonderful.
yeah,
I think it's boring, and you women out there that are going to hear this, and some of you guys, when your hairs are all the same color, I think there's a little bit of character that's missing there. So
yeah,
it's kind of good to have some highlights and a little bit of little touches here and there.
that's so
And your
true.
hair and since they can't see you, I just want to let them know you have beautiful long hair and it frames your face very nicely.
Oh, thank you so much. I think like a lot of women, during the pandemic, we weren't able to get to the salon. And then when you let it grow out, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't so bad. I think I'll just keep it this way. So I could have
Yeah,
saved a lot of money over the years if I had stopped coloring it a decade ago.
yeah. I've been married to a woman who has absolutely no vanity, at all with regard to coloring and that sort of thing. I've been after her to do her hair red because she started out as kind of like a summer blonde.
Mhm.
Uh, and over the years, since we've been together for a very long time, you at home don't know this, but I'm coming up on my 50th anniversary in just about 2 years from now. Uh,
Yay.
and she surprised me on a couple of occasions and came home with red hair, which I thought was really kind of cool out of nowhere. But other than that, the last 4 or 5 years, nah, she doesn't put anything on it. If
Well,
she
that's
gets it,
fun.
absolutely. When it gets to a certain point, and it doesn't dry quickly, she goes and gets it cut.
Now, what about you? Have you ever colored your beard there?
No, and did I tell you what the story is about this beard since you're interviewing
No,
me and all? So,
no.
this beard is a COVID beard. My,
Ah,
younger daughter has asked me to grow a beard 2 times in my life. Once when I was about 30, and it was black with red highlights in it, and when it came in, it only grew out to be about an inch, inch and a half long and stopped. And that was it. So I wore it that way. My dad was calling me, Sven the Woodcrafter, and, he had other little nicknames for me about the beard, most of which were not necessarily complimentary, but they were terms of endearment, like getting a rib shot, when you get a hug and then you get a little poke in the side of the ribs. And so that was it. I went without a beard. I mean, from there until like it was, 3 years ago, really coming up in June or July. My daughter, number two, said again, "Hey, Dad, it's COVID, man. Everybody's growing beards. Your son-in-laws are doing it. Why don't you do it?" I said, "Well, if all my friends are doing it, I guess I better get after it, right?" So it got to be about this long, and then the next thing I knew, I'm trimming it every sort of week to 10 days, taking a quarter of an inch off to try to keep that shape. And I said, finally, this is too much work. I'm just going to let it grow. So I've trimmed 3 inches off the bottom twice over that period of time. The last time I did it was about a year and a half ago. I'm just going to get it all the way out, and when I get it long enough to be, offered, a gig, with ZZ Top or somebody like that, I'll do a fundraiser and chop it all off and make some money for somebody,
I
some
love
need.
it. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So here's the next one.
Okay.
What is your favorite thing to do to intentionally waste time?
That usually involves hanging out with my daughter, who's 13, and she has gotten into watching NCIS. And, I watched NCIS when it came out, originally 20 years ago. And so now we're, I think, on season 5 or 6, and we'll just sit and binge watch a couple episodes. And yeah, it's really fun. It's actually really fun because that was back in the days when people had Blackberries and PDAs. And so it's so funny, and Gibbs is real confused about the technology. And now I think, 20 years later, we're so much more advanced. It's really funny.
Yeah. Mark Harmon, is that his
Yes.
show? My
Yeah.
mom loved Harm. She really did. And
Yes.
yeah, whatever was going on in her world, it all had to go on hold.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so my daughter and I have fun with that. That's our little wasting time thing.
Awesome. Anything else you do when your daughter's not around?
Um, well, I don't know that it's necessarily a wasting time thing, but I love to get out and go hiking. I live in the mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, and it's beautiful here. So that's the best way to sort of lose track of time is just get out in the woods.
Is that Blue Ridge or Smokies, or are you in that part of the
Yes.
world?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
it,
It's
it is
beautiful here.
beautiful through there, especially the interstates that kind of go up a mile and a half and then down a mile and a half and then up a mile.
Yes. Yeah,
Quite
it's
amazing.
gorgeous here.
Yeah. So on to the next question. What is your favorite movie to watch alone?
So I have to tell you, Bill, this is like one of the hardest things for me because I don't really watch television unless I'm with my daughter. I would rather be reading or spending time with friends or, doing something creative. So I had to really think about, okay, so what are the movies I have loved over the years? And I'm a kid of the 80s. So if I had to say, it would be one of those. It would be, Top Gun. It would be, Breakfast Club, Dirty Dancing. One of those.
Yeah.
So
Classics. Classic
yes,
all. No doubt
yes.
about it. You've lost that loving feeling, you know?
Yes. Well, and when the new Top Gun movie came out, what was that, 2 years ago? And people were like, oh, Tom Cruise, he's washed up or whatever. Man, I went and I thought it was just awesome. But I had wanted to be a pilot when I was younger. So I love all those flying sequences. So
It blew my socks off. I had absolutely no idea they were gonna be able to do that, even if it wasn't real. I mean, the scenes, I'm not gonna be a spoiler here, but if you haven't seen the new Top Gun, you owe it to yourself because there are so many wow, you know? A lot of movies have "yeah, right" sequences, but Top Gun is a lot of wow.
I thought it was an excellent sequel. A lot of sequels don't live up to the hype, but I thought they did a really good job. But
I
I'm
completely.
probably one of the few Tom Cruise fans out there. So
Yeah, yeah, he's having trouble making ends meet, I understand, so
I know, poor
it's good
guy.
that you and I like him, right?
Well, I was a teenager when he first came on the scene with Risky Business. So, you know,
That was fun. That was when boys started taking their pants off and girls loved it.
uh-oh. Right. We want to keep this G rated though, right?
100%,
Okay.
when Kevin Bacon and his little dance and, yeah,
Yes, with Footloose. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
for sure. So, let's just move on here to the next one. I think I've got another question for you. All right. So, if you were to have an action figure made of you, Elizabeth, what superpower would it have, and what colors would the uniform be?
Well, the colors are easy. It would be purple and turquoise because those are my two favorites. Um, I think I would love to be able to buy locate because there are so many people that I always want to see and visit and places that I want to go and travel. And so if I could be in like multiple places at one time, that would just be not only fun but more efficient too.
That's very cool. All right. So there's the fun aspect of it. Would you do anything to make the world a better place? Is there an altruistic bent to your superpowers, or are you just more or less going to be selfish with them?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, sure, of course, I want to be altruistic. And, I think for me, it's about connection.
Yeah.
It's about connecting with the people that I love and care about. I've moved around a ton. I've lived in, I don't know, 13 or 14 cities in the last 30 years. So I have friends all over the place and I have family all over the place. I'm actually the oldest of 12 kids, which is a whole nother story. And so, I would love to be spending more time with the people that I love and care about. So,
Yeah. So you're one of those folks that when the, shelf paper gets a little bit dirty, you're on to the next place?
Yes, I move around quite a bit. Although I just came back to Asheville after 15 years away, so I'm happy to be back in this town that I love so much.
And what's that like for you since you're back now and you had this hiatus period, which a lot of things changed, I would imagine, yes?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting, because and I think you and I had discussed this. I'm originally from Connecticut. I was raised in Connecticut,
Yep.
and, but I've lived in the South most of my adult life, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, Texas, I've kind of lived all over. But coming back to a city after 15 years away it was a big adjustment. And when I was here before, I was single, and then met my husband Eric, um, and so that was kind of a fun young time in my life. And now we have a 13-year-old daughter, and we're raising her, and so that's different. I still have the same group of friends, and yet a lot of people have gotten married or gotten divorced or had children, and so the dynamic is different. But it's just great being back here. This land, I don't know, you haven't been here, have you?
Not to
um,
Asheville per se, but I've been through several different places in North Carolina.
okay, there's something about these mountains that are really magical and mystical here, and
Yes.
you just feel it when you're out on the land. It just feels different than any place I've ever been.
Well, I can tell you that my wife and I going south have taken, the inland interstate through the Smoky Mountains,
Yeah,
uh,
down 81. Yeah.
down 81. You lie and I'll swear to it, okay? And the thing of it is that, I don't know, 3 years ago, I do this walkabout deal where I get in my car and I just drive for sometimes a couple weeks. And it's usually because my wife is busy doing something else, and I just have to go see my old buddies and friends all over the country. Sometimes it's in the Northeast. But on that trip, I drove the first day down to Annapolis, Maryland. And from there, I left Annapolis, Maryland. I took the most direct route over the mountains into Lexington, Kentucky.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know exactly everywhere I was, but it's the first time I've been on the interstate where there's actually a traffic light in the middle of the mountains. That was new and different. And yeah, I had to pay attention, play heads up ball driving around with those trucks and everything. It was quite different. But I
Yeah.
agree with you. There is a quality to the different parts of our country, especially the water portion of it. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, so the Rockies have always been a big part of me. I went to the University of Colorado,
Okay.
my first attempt at college, and then after that, I've been back many many times. I've got two daughters and two grandchildren, families that are living out in Denver right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. Mountains are cool.
Yeah, they are.
So, what did you wanna grow up to be when you were 5?
When I was little, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a pilot, then I wanted to be an astronaut. But then I really came back to I just wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly planes. And even in high school, my parents took me, speaking of Colorado, they took me to Colorado Springs, and we went and we toured the Air Force Academy. And
Sure.
I was all excited. I was going to join the Air Force because my dad had served in the Air Force. And then when I found out the requirements for your eyesight to be a pilot,
Yes.
I have worn glasses since I was 4 years old and contacts since I was 10 years old, and I would not have met the requirements. My dad was like, "Well, you can still join the Air Force." And I was like, "Not if I can't be a pilot, Dad." So I ended up going to William and Mary for college and went a completely different route. But I wanted to fly when I was a kid.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Did you have a particular, kind of plane that you wanted to fly? Was there something that you saw and you said, "That would really be neat"?
I don't think so, no. I think I loved, my family traveled a bit when I was little, and I just loved the freedom, the freedom of being up in the air and having that big picture view of everything that was going on, and it just I don't know, it seemed very glamorous to me, so now I understand it's, way more scientific, but, um
Yeah, there's a lot of science behind it, it turns out, huh?
Yes, yes. Well, I was watching, an interview with Sully, Captain Sully, who landed the plane in the Hudson.
Not Tom Hanks, but the real guy, right?
The real guy, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the real guy.
What
I
a
actually,
cool man.
I didn't see the movie, but I was watching Katie Couric's interview of him. I guess it must have been the anniversary of that landing a few months ago, and was just really listening to him talking about his process and how he really ended up operating on instinct in that moment. And his training, all of the training about what to do and who to, all of that kicked in, but he was just really operating on instinct. And I remember she asked him, she said, "Well, do you remember praying?" And he said, "I figured I had whatever 168 passengers in the back taking care of that for me."
He had church going on right at that moment.
That's right. That's right. And he was just focused on, getting everybody to safety. And he did. I mean, it's such a remarkable story. So,
Well, yeah, and he does all of the acts of heroism, and then afterwards he has to withstand the onslaught of all the second guessing and the insurance company nonsense, and
right.
but not to let the whole cat out of the bag. Tom Hanks does a reasonably good performance. I've never seen Sully himself, other than at the time they were fishing him out of the Hudson. Way back then, there was a when they got to dry land, they were just kind of quickly interviewing him, what happened and all this, and he just basically said, this was like a day at the office for me. So
Wow. That's
something
amazing.
self-effacing like that.
Well, I need to add this to my movie list then. Actually, I'm glad we're talking about this. I'll add Sully to my movie list.
Yeah, Tom's done a few things, pretty well, and since I don't really know the real character of Sully myself, I would definitely, have you put it on there. I mean, anybody that can talk to a volleyball,
Yes.
for sure, frisbee,
Yes.
paint a mustache on it and call him Wilson.
That's so true. That was a
Yeah.
great movie.
So, Elizabeth, I mean, I really appreciate all of that, and we'll kinda, like, fast forward to now or maybe the time in between. What would you say is your greatest accomplishment?
Well, I think as a mama, probably the first instinct would be to say, having a child and keeping her alive, relatively healthy and happy. Yeah, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she's had a lot of big life changes and challenges, and she's just an incredible kid. And that's been the greatest gift in my life. In terms of accomplishment, so maybe that's a personal accomplishment, feeling like, okay, I'm doing okay at this mama thing.
This is
um,
your question to do with what you will.
yeah, I think in terms of a professional accomplishment, it's actually fairly recent. I published my second book. Gosh, oh, I have a copy here. I'll show you. I know your listeners won't be able to see it, but this is my book. It's called Sacred Celebrations: Designing Rituals to Navigate Life's Milestone Transitions. And it actually just came out in November, and it's all about helping us go through life changes, the endings and beginnings of
Yeah.
births and marriages and divorce and death and moves and big changes. So
Yeah, you've had kind of an incredible personal journey, uh, do you use that experience to kind of go through this, or is this talking about things in general with regard to those types of occurrences?
Yeah, great question. It is part memoir. I definitely share a lot of my personal stories in there, but I also interview dozens and dozens of coaching clients and friends and relatives, and they share their stories of rituals and big life transitions as well. So it's a little bit of both. Um,
Yeah. Can you do me a favor and just hold the book up one more minute? I want to describe for the folks at home, if you're familiar with Peter Mack's art from the 1960s and early 70s, with very small heads, big bodies, and that sort of thing, like the Beatles' Yellow Submarine people.
uh-huh.
That's a little reminiscent of that style, but maybe not carried out, to the full nth degree. But they're sitting around in a circle holding each other's hands. And can you talk about that just a little bit, and like what that might be about, and how you got inspired to have that as the cover?
Thank you for asking that. Yes, because the concept of sacred celebrations to me, there's a lot that's been written about ritual, personal ritual, self care ritual, how can you do things to take care of yourself? But for me, the what this book is about being in community. It's
Yeah.
about holding and witnessing one another, whether it's a group of women friends or a group of men friends, or if it's family members, multi-generational. Of course, we always love when we can have those experiences too, but it's really about witnessing one another as we go through these big changes. Think about a funeral. I mean, I know you and I are both going to be contributing to this book on grief and loss, and a lot of the
Yeah.
people in there will be writing about loved ones that have passed. And this idea that when we go to a funeral, it's this very universal experience, it's very communal, and we're all witnessing and loving on one another. And we need more of that in our society. I think we're living in such a siloed way. It used to be that we lived multi-generationally, right? And we'd have
Yes.
grandparents and aunties and uncles. And now everybody kind of lives in their little bitty family unit, and people are really isolated, and we need to reconnect more. We need to have more community. And so that's what this book is about creating rituals to create those bonds.
I really like it. I will have a copy on order. Are you on Audible, or is it just a print book?
Not yet. It's print and Kindle.
Okay, all right. Well, I will have a copy of that before the day is out.
Okay,
Um,
great.
you did mention that you and I are collaborating on a book about grief and loss.
Yes.
Um, with the and maybe you could say again, what kind of outcomes would be great for you out of contributing to that? Again, with holding hands with another community of people, because as I understand it, there's, I don't know, upwards of 30 of us that are all writing chapters.
Yes. 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 Well, I think, I was so attracted to this project with Sam Ruth because, um, she's very expansive in her definition of grief, understanding that, grief and loss is not just about the death of a person. It can be the death of a marriage, or the end of a job or a career, or a shift in identity. There's so many different ways that grief shows up for us. So I think
Yeah,
for me, and I actually, my chapter is going to be writing about the grief and loss inherent in adoption,
right.
because I'm an adult adoptee and my daughter is an adoptee. And so talking about that system and how it's built on grief and loss, and just to sort of amplify, I think, all of the different ways that people are walking around carrying grief, and yet they're still functioning human beings, right? We're still, raising kids and doing good work in the world, and yet we're all carrying sadness and loss with us.
I love that you're saying that. In particular, we look at people and outwardly they look like, they're just going through a terrific life, and in many, many cases, some of them, all of them would have a reason to break down if they were to stop and just think hard on the subject. But some of them are literally just a, a random occurrence away from breaking down. And if we knew that about each other, how would we ever do anything other than just be kind?
That's so true. It's so true. And, when you shared your story with me about, I think you said it was losing your dad and your best friend within a month.
Within a month, yeah.
Yeah. Just what, I mean, both in and of themselves are just such significant losses. And then to have both at the same time is just, it must have been a really tender time for you.
Yeah, and it was kind of the culmination. I'm gonna write about this obviously, but it was the culmination. They were in the top 25 of people that I had lost in the previous 3 years.
Wow.
A lot of other family members, relatives, longtime friends who lost a mate, or lost a
Mhm.
child. It just was a very difficult time to catch a good full breath, if you will.
Yes.
And that was a transformational moment for me. I won't let the cat out of the bag now, but I do think all of you will maybe one of the chapters in the book you'll find yourself in, and it's not too early for you to start pinging me about how you can get a copy of it in advance. Or Elizabeth, folks, when we sign off, we'll give you an opportunity to let people know how to get in touch with you as well.
That's great. Have we told folks the name of the book that we're working on?
Nope,
It's
be my
called
guest.
Yeah, it's called Faces of Grief, and it will
Yep,
be released in early December.
yep. Yes, Samantha was my guest on this podcast, I think, either 3 or 4 folks ago. So,
Okay,
it's been
great.
a minute or 2, and I really appreciate you, plugging our good friend, plugging your own work, and, I'm only here because you're cool, okay?
Well, thank you. I like being part of the cool kids club.
Yes, you are, there's no doubt about it, not because I said so. So, back onto the questions again, Elizabeth. You
Okay.
can see that I find you fascinating, and I could probably just be here all day with you. Uh, however, uh, bearing in mind that our listeners have kind of a cadence, and they don't mind it when we spend a minute or two, but we've had a good time talking about your accomplishment. But who's your favorite person to listen to?
That is such a hard question to answer, Bill. I honestly, I mean, there could be like 5 different answers for that. But I think the one I'm gonna go with, and I know I've already talked about her, but is my daughter. She's 13, her name is Riley, and she helps me see the world in a different way. As I think all of our young people do, right? They have a playfulness and enthusiasm and innocence about them that for me, she helps me get out of my grown up, responsible to do list brain, gotta get the stuff done, and helps me just be silly and playful. Like last night, so you know how we just had the time change. And it was time for her to go to bed, and this child was just bouncing around the house like Tigger, from Winnie the Pooh, and she was singing the Tigger song, whatever it is. She's a little actress and a singer, and we were just cutting up last night, just having so much fun. And I so appreciate her reflections. Just on the world and on life and on people, and she just really makes me think differently.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Well, in some ways, I envy you because I feel the same way when I'm around my grandsons.
Yeah.
They're a couple years younger than her, but not too much. And they're the same way. They're both at a they're at the age where they're really thinking and engaging in terms of their questions. Their sense of humor, is really really funny sometimes. And
Yes.
it's not funny in a jokey sort of a way. It's like deadpan, and you got to listen, okay? But the bouncing around like Tigger, I've got the older one that's kind of his shtick, and then the younger one is going to be more like kind of very dryly coming up and saying, "Hey grandpa, is it true that we really have to eat spaghetti tonight?" you know and then he'll say, "Because you know that all of those individual spaghettis, they all gave their lives for us," or something like that. He said, I have a hard time sleeping at night when I think about all of those spaghettis." And I said, "I know what you mean, Lincoln." And then he follows it up and he says, "And grandma's having gluten free." And he says to me, he says, "What happens to all the free glutens? Where do they go?" And I said, "It's a mystery, my son. It's a mystery."
And that's I'm like, that's exactly it, right? Like
Yeah.
they come up with these crazy random things, and yeah, it's so fun, so playful.
Well, I kind of share your enthusiasm for Riley. She sounds like somebody who's a force of nature. I'm looking forward to hearing her speak someday.
She is. You will. She'll be on the big screen, I think.
I can't wait. So, please complete this sentence, if you will, Elizabeth. When I grow up, I'd like to.
Buy a one-way ticket and travel around the world.
Interesting. So, say some more about that. How would that go?
Well, my college roommate did that with one of our other college friends. After they graduated from William and Mary, they said, we want to go have an adventure. And they bought, I guess you can buy a one-way ticket going east or going west and go all the way around the world. And they did. And they traveled for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months. And I just think, when I hear about her stories, and of course, this was a long time ago, I've been out of college many decades now, but just the idea of experiencing all these different cultures and talking with different people and seeing how they all live. I mean, I think that when and I've been fortunate, I've been able to travel quite a bit. But I think when we can see people who live differently than we do and have different priorities and values and language and food and landscape and all of that, it just informs our experience. I think we here in America tend to be very myopic. And when you go and travel other places in the world, you go, oh, wait a minute, there's a different way of looking at things. So I would love to
It's
have that
fascinating.
experience.
Are there any particular places that you would want to make sure that if you couldn't go everywhere, that you wouldn't want to miss those?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a bucket list. I mean, I'd love to go to Thailand. I'd love to go to New Zealand and Australia. Egypt's on my list. I actually haven't been to England or Scotland, and I would like to do that just because of my heritage, knowing that I'm from there. Yeah, those are probably some of them.
Good for you.
How about you? What's on your bucket list?
Definitely New Zealand and Scotland, Australia, the UK, certain parts of it. I would love to do a pilgrimage to Liverpool. I have dear friends that are, because I used to be president of a homeowners association of a community down in Florida for about 15 years. Most of the folks that lived there, my neighbors were all Brits. There were
Hmm.
vacation rental homes for the most part. And then when it came time for our annual general meeting, the Brits would fly in from all over the world, to come in and put their 2 cents in, either voting for, who the board members were going to be or that. And was supposed to go on a 3-week long trip in 2009 and start off with 3 days in Cork, followed up by landing in in England and going to 5 different locations there, all friends. Got completely, got scuttled by the Reykjavik volcano, shut everything
Mm,
and
wow.
we planned this trip for a year. And the day that our trip was supposed to go, they reopened the airways again, and by that time they were like 3 weeks of no travel, and it just didn't make any sense. So
Hmm.
thank you for asking me. And that's the long answer to, is there anything on your bucket list? There's that, and there's more.
Okay. Understood.
Yeah. So the next question, if you're thrown to give me answers you've already given, I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper than that. And I don't mean like better or anything like that, but maybe just something else that kind of occurs to you right now. What's the most important thing in life to you right this minute?
To me, it's just about living life in Technicolor, like really living it out loud and fully. I was actually in a almost fatal car accident last year
Wow.
and had a near death experience, and couldn't work for about 4 months. And it really it changed a lot of things. I mean, I think I'm always someone who has enjoyed life and, valued relationships and doing good work in the world and being of service and all of that. But having an accident like that at a young age, I'm in my young 50s, helped me to go, wow, I could have checked out. And we never know when our time is up. And to just really be willing to take risks and have fun and be playful and not worry what people think anymore, and not worry about judging myself or others, and just say, what feels good, and trust my intuition, and just go out there and live life. Even if it doesn't always make sense, I think I've always been the logical, practical, do what you're supposed to do. And
That
it's
would
like,
be a result of William and Mary. I mean, I hear that a lot from William and Mary grads, so
well, it was a pretty special place. But yeah, I mean, there was some traditional stuff there. And I've certainly learned that from my parents. You grow up, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, sort of the blah blah blah. This is how we're supposed to do it. And I've done those things, but I'm also at a stage of life, as a newly divorced person, and single mama, and business owner, going, okay, so what do I want now for this next stage of my life? So
well, I
yeah.
really love how you languaged it, and I know there's ample, input from all sorts of different books that would be kinda distilled down into living out loud and in Technicolor, but when you said it, your face lit up, you know? And I gotta share that with the folks at home. You have a beautiful smile, and there's really just a lot of energy that comes from you, um, in terms of emoting, and I kind of get that there were new things that showed up for you, possibly that you had never noticed before, or that maybe you had just kind of like played over or played past while you were busy, doing the busy work that you were, getting your life done. And I'm real interested, in addition to what you've said already, is there anything in particular that you've kind of like picked up or decided that you were going to do that before you might have considered to be a little frivolous or maybe not so much?
That's a good question. Um, I don't know if I would say about frivolous, but definitely writing more.
Yeah.
Writing has been somewhat a part of my path, but sort of there was a commitment to, wow, I have a lot I still need to say, and I better get to it. And it's interesting that my book came out about 6 months after my accident, but I had been working on it. It was a 7-year process from when I started writing to when it actually got published. And so just this notion of, oh wait, if I have more to say, I can't keep doing it in 7-year increments, or I'll never get everything done. So I'm gonna step it up a little bit.
That's funny. That's just the opposite of what I was saying to my wife while we were on the cruise. I love that you and I want to ask you this before I say what I'm going to say, because what you have to say is far more important. So for you, is it would you, use a metaphor of peeling an onion skin, or a fire hose that you have to put some sort of a choke on so that you can, like, contain everything that's coming out? Which metaphor would work better for you? Or is there
Uh,
another one?
It's probably more the peeling of the onion, although I would say my head feels like the fire hose at times, but in terms of my actual output, it's more the peeling the layers of the onion, like, let's keep getting deeper with this. And,
Yeah.
as I've mentioned before, I have a real passion for the topic of adoption. And I think because of my life experience and expertise in that, I have some things to contribute. And instead of doing it privately, I need to be doing it more publicly, and writing is a really good way to do that, to get the message out there, so
Well, having spent as little time as I have with you, the quality of our interaction, as brief as it's been over the last couple of weeks, I have to say I totally agree with you. I think you got some good stuff out there that'll make a huge difference in the world.
thank you.
So I'm going to use that as a segue. I didn't intend to, but the next question is what would you like to leave in the world after your life is done?
Mm. Okay, I'm trying not to be too redundant, but, it goes back to that parenting thing of, if I can raise a human being to be good and loving and kind and decent and caring and a contributing member of society, then that's the best possible legacy I could imagine. I mean, and everything else, I mean, sure, would I love to write more books? Absolutely. Would I love to serve my community more and create circles of people and connections? Absolutely, all of that. But really, as a mama, I mean, I knew when I was very little that I wanted to be a mom, and I've been blessed with an incredible kid, and I think she's doing good stuff in the world. And when we look at the state of the world, and we don't even want to talk about that right now, but things are challenging, and people are fractured and they're broken, and we're having a hard time having conversations. And I think if we can raise this next generation to be open and loving and be willing to have the hard conversations and teach them to not shy away from that, that's what's going to help us get through this mess.
Well, I like that. And if I can pry, you've mentioned a couple of times about making a difference, in the area of adoption. Um, can you say maybe a little bit more about that beyond your own personal reach? You've probably got the world's best daughter, in Riley, no doubt about it. So I'm going to concede that to you right off the bat. And what about everyone else? What would you like to leave them?
Well, I think that around adoption, I think a lot of the work that I'll be writing about and talking more about is this notion of really looking at identity and how we show up in the world, and how people who are impacted by adoption, their identity is something. I mean, I suppose we all deal with identity issues at one time or another. It's part of the human experience, right?
We either
But
know it or we don't, right?
right, exactly. But I think adoptees in particular, and adoptive parents and biological parents, have some different challenges. And so really looking at that and understanding that, is there a spiritual contract there? What can we learn from the relationships that we have, and how can we expand our ability to love all the different people in our lives? We talk about, like, with my daughter and with myself, we don't have a family tree, we have a family forest. Um, and so, how can we integrate all of those relationships into our lives, but into our identity and who we know ourselves to be? So that's, I think, a lot of the work I want to be doing, is talking more to folks about that.
Yeah, and what I hear, and what I'm inferring from what you're saying, I don't know if it's implicit in what you're saying, but I hear, the discovery aspect, in terms of being a person in a forest as opposed to a tree allows you to kind of trip over things that you weren't expecting, I would imagine.
I love how you just reflected that, Bill. Thank you. That gives me a really good visual. Yeah, I mean, because it opens doors to be like, oh, well, wait, I see this and I see that. And what about this? And, like, we're raising our daughter to know that she has four parents. She has, mom and dad, her adoptive parents, and then she has birth mom and birth dad. And
Yeah.
even though we may not all be, active in her life, that's all part of who makes up who she is and where she comes from. And, being mindful of that as she moves forward in the world. So
Yeah, and the other part of it is mindful, respectful, and honoring of what came before, and the value of who she is now and what she has in her contribution that's unique, to give to the rest of the world
that's right.
in whatever way she chooses to that works for her. But never will she ever have a day where there's not work to do.
Yes. Yes.
It's me talking, but I'm kind of picking up nonverbals from you. Whether I
Yeah.
get it right or not, it's not necessarily the issue.
No, you're good.
Okay. So, do you do much bakery buying?
Much bakery buying? I don't. I'm one of those free of gluten people.
You you leave all the glutens out there to just be free range, right?
I
And
love
you just
bakeries, but yeah, I don't do much anymore, but
I just got a mind picture of the Smoky Mountains just covered with a whole side with a huge herd of glutens, just over there enjoying the morning, and the mist coming up and yeah. Well, anyhow,
you have to ask your grandson to draw you a picture of the glutens running free, see what he would draw.
that's awesome, and he will because he's one heck of an artist. So when I go to my favorite bakers, it's Mata's down here. I've been going to them for close to 40 years, and when I buy a dozen rolls, I always get a free one. I've never bought a dozen loaves of bread, so I don't know what they would do in that circumstance. But anything else that's cupcakes or what have you, cookies, always going to get a 13th one, and you're going to get a baker's question. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
So, Elizabeth, what is the thing that most people misunderstand about you?
Hmm. It's an interesting question. Um, are you into astrology at all, Bill?
A little bit.
Okay, this is just enough to be dangerous, right?
I'm a
Um,
Pisces Aries cusp. We can work with that.
okay, there you go. All right. So I'm a Capricorn sun. So on the surface, I look like I have my act together, right? For the most part, I do. And I'm a Scorpio rising. And so what that means is that I really like the deep dive. I like to talk about the metaphysical, the mystery, the miracles, the curiosities in our universe. And I love to um, really go deep in those conversations with people, often quickly. I mean, you and I have kind of like we've started a little bit of that here today.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think sort of the upfront and the exterior is a little different than the deeper dive conversationalist that's here. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, and what you're saying is how it really is, people. But what do you think they think about you? Just that you've got it all together, and maybe you're still figuring things out and doing the best you can to look like you've got everything figured out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think people look at me and think, oh, she's, got, good career and, great kid and loving family and friends and, she's got her act together. But, for people who've been in my world the last couple years, they know it's been a virtual, well, I'll use PG language, dumpster fire, let's say. Of, 2 moves and a divorce and 2 surgeries and, 2 parents dying in a car accident. And, it's been a really rough time. Kind of like you were talking about, your 3 years of such great losses.
Some people would refer to that as a double S.
There you go. That's what I was gonna say, but I I
That's
didn't
the
I didn't know if it
code.
was appropriate.
We have had people, drop an expletive every once in a while, but I appreciate your appropriateness, and I want to also say that having gone through everything that you've gone through, I want to commend you. Not simply for looking like you have it all together, but you're obviously a self-described work in progress, and I believe that's refreshing. I really appreciate your genuineness, and I also appreciate the fact that you don't know the answers at this point. You have some ideas of what the questions might be, and you're
Right.
still working on the questions, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, living into the questions really and saying, "Okay, so what's here?" And I think the car accident really did that for me, kinda opened me up to be like, "Okay, universe, what you got for me? Let's see let's see what shows up.
Well, yeah, and things were already cool being the age of Aquarius and all. I mean, how far off base can you be? But
Right.
to have lived through circumstances that you might not have is to give you a whole new way to look at the mundane.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So that wraps up our standard questions, and I'll ask you first of all, do you have any questions of me?
I want to know what your favorite candy is. Talk about going deep.
All right, so I have to make deals with myself here, okay?
Okay.
I would probably say that in my lifetime, I have probably purchased at least $500 worth of Fireballs.
Ah! All right, so you love the cinnamon.
Well, there's that, and I like that it lasts a long time, you know? And
Mhm.
then, I got started buying the big plastic thing that looks like it goes on the counter. When I was a kid, we went in and they would take that out of the box, they put it on the counter, and then it was penny a Fireball, right? Or
Uh-huh.
two of the small ones for a penny. We went on a camping trip with my girls, which would probably have been back in the early 1980s. And I bought one of those bad boys, and all of us were eating fireballs all week long. And so after that, I just wound up continuously buying fireballs. There's also, and I'll tell you, I don't want to upset, the Jolly Rancher gods, because there's a lot to be said for Jolly Ranchers as well. First of all, there's a whole diversity. You can have a symphony in your mouth with a
Yes.
watermelon, a cinnamon, a blueberry, and then I mean, you can put in a player to be named later, and just have a really really good time.
Uh,
And the other thing is that dark milk chocolate, I would say maybe 70% cacao and up, breakup is the best. So
okay.
if I had to go someplace and choose three candies for the rest of my life, I would be good. I'd take all three of them. But if you told me, Bill, you only get one, I would be conflicted. Great question. Did you learn anything?
It's funny. So, well, you're a little spicy, so that's fun. The fireball shows me you're a little spicy.
What my daughter says.
That's great.
Good. And so, do you have any other things that you just want to mention before I have you again say who you are and how do people get in touch with you? Is there anything else that you want to say about either this interview or anything else that's on your mind that you'd like to just kind of get out in terms of this might be your opportunity to change the world? Who knows?
Well, I just want to acknowledge our new connection as a part of this Faces of Grief um, compilation book that we're going to be working on, because I think, it seems in the zeitgeist, and maybe this has really been since the pandemic, but more and more people are open to talking about grief. And we're acknowledging that we are all walking around carrying grief.
Yeah.
And that I think that's a really good thing, because what's happening is people are taking off the masks and we're sharing our vulnerabilities and we're connecting in deeper ways and more authentic ways with people. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So I'm happy to be part of that with you and with Sam Ruth and all the other people. And I love your interview process. Simple questions for 100 people. I think that's awesome, because that's how we learn about the world around us, right? Is by sharing our stories. So thanks for letting me share mine.
Yeah, I got to tell you, people are like snowflakes. No two are the same.
Right.
And anybody that wants to tell you that you're part of a group that all thinks the same way, I think they're full of fireballs.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, having said that, is there anything else? Would you like to again kind of identify how you people get in contact with you if you want?
Yeah, sure. Certainly by my websites. So my name again, it's Elizabeth Barbour, and it's spelled BARBOUR.com. So ElizabethBarbour.com. And then I have another website called SacredCelebrations.com.
Right.
Which is the name of my book, my second book, Sacred Celebrations. But I also have a jewelry line there, which we didn't talk about. But so I have a jewelry line there and some gift kits and things like that. So, and people can find me on social media. I tend to hang out mostly on Facebook and Instagram, a little bit on LinkedIn at Elizabeth Barbour. So,
Terrific. You are completely and absolutely delicious and wonderful. Okay. I
oh,
really enjoy you. And I thank you for coming on here and gracing our little podcast. And I would want to just leave at this moment by saying thank you, Elizabeth.
thank you.
You're very welcome. And you folks at home, I want to leave you with this thought too. We all know a lot of people, but I want you to get in the habit of reaching out to folks that you really love. Could be good friends, could be folks you work with, could be a family member. Reach out either by text, any other kind of message, telephone call, carrier pigeon, letter, what have you. Let them know that it means everything to you, that they're in the world, and that it would really not be a great world without them. And that if they ever are thinking that they need a friend, you're that person that they can count on to always be there. If you'll do
Mhm.
that for me and then challenge your friends and family to do that, let's just see if we can make a difference with some of the things that are not going well in this world. Having said that, this is the Simple Questions for 100 People podcast. Again, I'm Bill Carell, and it has been absolutely wonderful, Elizabeth Barbour, to have you as my guest today. Thank you again.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye now.
You've been listening to Simple Questions for 100 People, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.